Opening, the wind and the silence. There is a place in the eastern Sierra Nevada where the wind moves through empty windows and nobody hears it. Where tables are still set, bottles still stand on bars, and children's slates still rest on schoolhouse desks. Where an entire town exists in a state of permanent pause, neither alive nor completely gone, just waiting, quietly, for nothing in particular. This is Bodie, California. A ghost town, though that phrase doesn't quite capture what it is. Ghost town suggests something haunted, something restless. But Bodie isn't restless. It's perfectly still. It's a town that's been left to the wind and the dust and the slow, patient work of time. At nearly 8,400 feet above sea level, Bodie sits on a high desert plateau where the air is thin and clear. The landscape stretches in all directions, sagebrush, dry grass, and distant mountains under a sky so vast it seems to swallow sound. In summer, the sun beats down relentlessly. In winter, snow buries the buildings up to their windowsills. And through all seasons, the wind blows constant, whistling through gaps in weathered wood, rattling loose boards, carrying away one grain of the town at a time. The buildings lean slightly, their boards silvered by decades of sun and snow. Paint has long since peeled away. Roofs sag in places. Windows gape dark and empty. And yet, step inside any of these structures and you'll find them remarkably intact. Furniture sits where it was last placed. Dishes rest in cupboards. Bottles line shelves behind saloon bars. Tools hang on walls. Clothing still drapes over chair backs. It looks, in many ways, like everyone simply walked away one afternoon and never came back. This is what's known as arrested decay. Bodie is maintained, if that's even the right word, in a state of frozen deterioration. Nothing is restored. Nothing is cleaned up or put back together. The buildings are stabilized just enough to keep them from collapsing entirely, but otherwise they're left alone to weather and fade and slowly return to the earth from which they came. It creates an unusual sensation when you walk through Bodie. You're seeing something authentic, something untouched, but also something that's actively disappearing before your eyes. The town exists in that strange space between presence and absence, between memory and forgetting, but Bodie wasn't always empty. It wasn't always silent. There was a time, not so long ago, really, just a few generations back, when this place was alive with noise and movement and human ambition. When thousands of people called these streets home. When the stamp mills thundered day and night, when piano music drifted from saloons, when children ran laughing through these same dirt streets. What happened here? How does a town of 10,000 people simply empty out and fade away? And what remains when the people are gone but their possessions stay behind? The discovery, gold in the hills. The story begins in 1859 with a man named William S. Bodie, though by most accounts, Bodie himself didn't live long enough to see what his discovery would become. He and a small group of prospectors were making their way through these remote hills when they found promising gold deposits. It was late in the season, and the weather was turning. Bodie didn't make it through that first winter. He died in a blizzard, somewhere in these same hills that would later bear his name, but the gold he'd found didn't disappear with him. Word spread slowly at first. This was hard country to reach, isolated, brutally cold in winter, far from any established settlements. The hills here were dotted with pinyon pine and sagebrush, offering little shelter and less comfort. Water was scarce. The winters were punishing. It wasn't the kind of place people came to unless they had a very good reason. Gold, it turned out, was reason enough. Through the 1860s, miners trickled in. Small camps sprung up. Men worked claims with hand tools, panning streams, digging into hillsides, following veins of quartz and hoping for color. Many found nothing. Some found enough to keep going. A few struck it rich. By the 1870s, word had really spread. Major strikes were bringing up significant quantities of gold and silver. Mining companies began to form. Investment money flowed in. What had been a collection of tents and rough cabins began to transform into something more permanent, and people came. Not just miners, but everyone who follows miners, merchants and saloon keepers, blacksmiths and carpenters, doctors and lawyers, teachers and prostitutes, families seeking opportunity, and drifters seeking anything at all. They came from San Francisco and Sacramento, from the exhausted gold fields of the Mother Lode, from failed ventures in Nevada and Montana. They came from back east, from Europe, from China. They came with hope and desperation in equal measure. The town that grew up around those gold deposits took the name of the man who'd found them, though somewhere along the way, the spelling shifted from Bodie to Bodie. Perhaps it was a clerical error. Perhaps it was intentional, to ensure the name would be pronounced correctly. Either way, the new spelling stuck and Bodie grew rapidly. Where there had been sagebrush and silence, there were now streets. Where there had been empty hillsides, there were now mine shafts and stamp mills. Where there had been nothing but wind, there was now the constant sound of human activity, hammering, sawing, shouting, laughing, the rumble of wagons, the rhythmic thunder of the mills crushing rock to extract precious metal. By 1879, Bodie had reached its peak. Nearly 10,000 people lived here. The town stretched across the plateau in a grid of unpaved streets lined with wooden buildings. There were 65 saloons, hotels, restaurants, general stores, a bank, a firehouse, churches, schools, newspapers, a Chinatown, a red light district. Everything a frontier boomtown needed to function. For a brief moment in history, Bodie was thriving. It was real. It was alive. And nobody who lived here could have imagined that one day it would all be gone. Imagine Bodie in 1879. Not as it is now, empty and silent, but as it was then, at the height of its existence. Main Street runs straight through the center of town, a wide dirt road constantly churned by wagon wheels and foot traffic. On both sides, wooden buildings stand shoulder to shoulder, storefronts with large windows displaying goods, saloons with swinging doors, hotels with second-story porches where men lean against railings watching the street below. The stamp mills run 24 hours a day, their rhythmic pounding echoing across the valley. They crush or brought up from the mines, the huge stamps rising and falling, pulverizing rock to extract the gold and silver trapped inside. The sound is constant, part of the town's heartbeat. You can hear it from anywhere in Bodie. Even at night, even in your sleep, that distant thunder continues. Miners work in shifts, descending into the earth through vertical shafts, working by candlelight in narrow tunnels hundreds of feet below the surface. The work is dangerous. Cave-ins happen. Accidents with explosives are common. Men die underground more often than anyone keeps careful count of. But the pay is good, $4 a day when you can get it, and for many, that's enough. After their shifts, the miners flood into town, filling the saloons and gambling halls. They're covered in rock dust, exhausted, thirsty, looking to spend their wages on whiskey and cards and whatever distraction they can find. The saloons are loud and crowded, thick with tobacco smoke, lit by oil lamps that cast flickering shadows. Piano music competes with conversation and laughter. Sometimes fights break out. Sometimes gunshots echo in the street. Bodie has a reputation for lawlessness. "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie," a young girl supposedly wrote in her diary when her family decided to move here. Whether or not that story is true, it captures something real about the town's character. Violence is common. Killings happen regularly, over card games, over women, over imagined slights and actual grievances. There's a cemetery that fills quickly with the bodies of men who died violently, but Bodie isn't only saloons and gunfights. There are families here too. Children attend the schoolhouse on Green Street, learning their lessons in a wooden building heated by a pot-bellied stove. Women manage households, cook meals, raise children in circumstances far from ideal. There are church services on Sundays. Social gatherings. Attempts at respectability and civilization. Even in this rough place, the winters are brutal. Snow can pile 6, 8, 10 feet deep. The town is often cut off completely from the outside world for months at a time. Temperatures plunge well below zero. Wind tears through the streets with nothing to stop it. People burn through their supplies of wood and food, huddling close to stoves, waiting for spring, and yet, life continues. Babies are born. Couples marry. Businesses open and close. People argue and reconcile and go about the daily work of existing. They build lives here, even knowing, in some deep, unspoken way, that this might not last forever, because gold towns never do, the deposits are finite. The richest veins get worked out. The easy gold gets found and extracted. And slowly, inevitably, production begins to decline. The rhythm of life, details of existence. To understand what Bodie was, you have to understand the rhythms of daily life there, the ordinary moments that filled the hours between larger events. Morning in Bodie begins before dawn for the miners going on shift. They dress in cold bedrooms, their breath visible in the air. They eat quick breakfasts, coffee, bread, maybe eggs if they're available. Then they walk through the dark streets to the mine entrances, joining other men doing the same. The stamps are already pounding. The mills never stop. Women rise early too, lighting stoves, starting fires, beginning the work of managing a household in a place where everything is difficult. Water has to be hauled. Laundry takes hours of labor. Food is expensive and often limited in variety. Keeping a house warm in winter requires constant attention to the fire. The altitude makes cooking different. Bread doesn't rise the same way, water boils at a lower temperature. Children walk to school along wooden boardwalks, passing saloons and stores, mine buildings and/or wagons. The schoolhouse is one room, heated by a stove in winter, stifling in summer. The teacher manages students of all ages, trying to maintain some order and deliver some education in circumstances that make both challenging. At the general stores, merchants sell everything the town needs. Tools, fabric, canned goods, medicines, tobacco, household items shipped in at great expense from San Francisco or Sacramento. The stores are crowded with shelves and barrels and hanging goods. Shopping is a social activity, a chance to exchange news and gossip. The Chinese community has its own district, its own stores and restaurants and meeting places. The residents work as laundrymen, cooks, merchants, miners. They maintain their own cultural practices, celebrate their own festivals, navigate the often hostile attitude of white residents who resent their presence. In the red light district on Virgin Alley and Bonanza Street, prostitutes work in small cribs and brothels. This is dangerous, poorly paid work, but it's work nonetheless, and the women who do it are as much a part of Bodie's economy as anyone else. Some die young, from disease, violence, overdoses of laudanum. Some manage to save money and leave. Most simply endure for as long as they can. Evening brings a different energy to town. The day shift ends, and miners emerge from underground, blinking in the light. They wash off the rock dust as best they can and head for the saloons. The streets fill with movement and noise. Lamps are lit in windows. Smoke rises from chimneys. Piano music starts up. The gambling halls open their doors, and through it all, the stamp mills pound, constant as a heartbeat. But even at Bodie's peak, there are signs of fragility. Some mines hit water and can't pump it out fast enough. Some shafts follow veins that peter out into nothing. Some companies run out of capital and shut down. For every successful mine, there are others that fail. The newspaper reports production numbers. Everyone watches them closely. When production is up, there's optimism. When it starts to fall, there's worry. By the early 1880s, production is falling. The departure, slow exodus. The end doesn't come suddenly. There's no single moment when Bodie dies. Instead, it fades, slowly, steadily, over years and then decades. The richest veins are exhausted by the mid-1880s. Mines that once produced thousands of dollars in gold per ton now yield only a few dollars, barely enough to cover the cost of extraction. One by one, mining companies shut down operations. The stamp mills fall silent. Miners lose their jobs. And when the miners leave, everything else follows. The saloons have fewer customers. Stores sell less. Hotels have empty rooms. The town's population begins to drop, not all at once, but family by family, business by business. Some people leave quickly, packing their belongings and heading out as soon as they lose work. Others linger, hoping things will turn around, hoping some new strike will bring the boom back. But the new strikes don't come, or when they do, they're too small to matter. Imagine being one of the last families to make the decision. You've built a life here. Your children were born here. You have friends, routines, a house full of possessions. Leaving means starting over somewhere else, and who knows if it will be better, but eventually, the decision makes itself. There's no work. The mines are closed. The town is shrinking. And one morning, you pack your belongings into a wagon, not everything, there's not room for everything, and you leave. You lock the door to your house behind you, or maybe you don't bother. And you head down the long dirt road toward wherever you're going next. Behind you, Bodie grows quieter. By 1900, the population has dropped to a few hundred. By 1910, it's less than 100. The buildings stand empty. Doors bang in the wind. Windows break and nobody repairs them. Snow blows into abandoned rooms and melts in the spring, warping floors and staining walls. In 1892, a massive fire sweeps through the business district, destroying much of the downtown. It's rebuilt, but not to the same scale. The new buildings are smaller, fewer. The town that rises from the ashes is a shadow of what it was. Another fire in 1932 destroys even more. By then, there's almost nobody left to care. The post office closes. The school closes. The church holds its last service. The few remaining residents, mostly caretakers and the occasional die-hard miner still working marginal claims, rattle around in a town built for thousands, and finally, by the 1940s, even they are gone. Bodie is empty, not destroyed, not deliberately abandoned, just empty. A town that once held 10,000 people now holds none. The buildings stand. The streets remain. Everything is still there. But the people are gone, and without people, a town is just a collection of structures slowly returning to the earth. The stillness, what remains? Return now to present-day Bodie. Walk its streets as they are now, silent, empty, frozen in time. The main street is still visible, though sagebrush grows between the ruts. The wooden buildings still stand, though they lean at odd angles, their boards weathered to silver gray. Some have partially collapsed. Others look almost intact, as if you could step inside and find someone home. And when you do step inside, carefully, because the floors are uncertain, you find something remarkable. The interiors are furnished. Tables still have chairs pushed up to them. Stoves still stand in corners. Shelves still hold bottles and cans and miscellaneous objects. In the general store, goods still line the walls, bottles of patent medicine, bolts of fabric faded by time, tools hanging from hooks. In the saloon, bottles still stand behind the bar, glasses waiting on shelves. In houses, beds are still made, or unmade, as they were left. Clothes still hang on hooks. Dishes still sit in cupboards. In one kitchen, a table is set as if for a meal. In another, children's toys lie scattered on the floor. On a mantelpiece, a clock has stopped at some long-ago hour. In the schoolhouse, desks still stand in rows. Textbooks lie open. A slate leans against a wall. The pot-bellied stove sits cold in the corner. On the teacher's desk, papers wait to be graded. In the cemetery at the edge of town, wooden markers and stone headstones memorialize the dead. Miners killed in accidents, children who died of illness, women who died in childbirth, men who died violently. Some graves have names and dates. Others are marked only with rocks. The wind has knocked many markers over. The inscriptions on those that remain are fading, becoming illegible. Everything here speaks of absence. Not dramatic absence, not the absence of destruction or catastrophe, but simple, quiet absence. The absence of continuation. The absence of anyone to use these objects, to walk these streets, to live these lives. It's eerie, but not frightening. Melancholic, but not tragic. There's something almost peaceful about it, the sense that this place has been released from the burden of purpose, that it's been allowed to simply be, to weather and fade on its own terms. The wind moves through the empty buildings, stirring dust that dances in shafts of sunlight. Birds nest in the rafters. Small animals make homes in corners. The natural world is slowly reclaiming the space, but gently, gradually, without aggression. And the silence. The silence is profound. At this elevation, with no trees to rustle, no water to murmur, no traffic, no human voices, the quiet is almost physical. You can hear your own heartbeat. Your own breathing. The creak of old wood. The whisper of wind through broken windows. This is what remains when a town empties out. Not nothing, but something strange and in between. A place suspended between existence and non-existence, holding on to its past even as that past fades grain by grain, board by board, year by year. Arrested decay, time's patient work. Bodie became a California State Historic Park in 1962, preserved specifically in this state of arrested decay. It's an unusual choice for historic preservation. Most historical sites are restored, rebuilt, repainted, made to look as they did in their heyday. Bodie is different. The philosophy here is to let the buildings age naturally, to stabilize them just enough to prevent immediate collapse, but otherwise to let time do its work. It's a form of preservation that acknowledges impermanence. That accepts that nothing lasts forever, and perhaps shouldn't. That sees value in the process of fading, not just in the original state. The park rangers and maintenance staff work quietly to keep Bodie from disappearing entirely. They shore up foundations. They secure roofs. They remove snow in winter to prevent buildings from being crushed. They monitor the structures, watching for signs of imminent failure, intervening when necessary but not before. It's delicate work. The goal is to maintain this balance, to keep the buildings standing without making them look maintained. To preserve without restoring. To hold the town in this moment of decay without letting it tip over into complete ruin. And nature, for its part, continues its patient work. The wood dries and cracks. Paint flakes away. Metal rusts. Windows break. Floors sag. Walls lean. Each winter, snow and ice push and pull. Each summer, the sun bleaches and dries. Wind erodes everything gradually, carrying away one speck at a time. Inside the buildings, objects slowly deteriorate. Paper yellows and becomes brittle. Fabric rots. Leather dries and cracks. Bottles might still hold liquid, but the labels have long since faded. Photographs turn brown and lose their detail. And yet, somehow, the impression remains. The sense of lives interrupted, of time stopped, of a moment preserved even as it slowly unpreserves itself. This is what makes Bodie so powerful as a place. It's not frozen in amber, perfectly preserved and unchanging. It's actively fading, visibly aging, slowly disappearing. And that process, that visible passage of time, is part of what it has to teach us. Nothing lasts. Everything fades. Even places where thousands of people lived and worked and loved and died eventually return to silence. But there's a dignity in that fading. A rightness to it. The wind that tears at these buildings is the same wind that blew through these streets when they were full of people. The sun that bleaches this wood is the same sun that warmed the faces of children playing in these streets. The place remains itself even as it changes. It holds its memories even as it forgets them. Closing, the horizon of memory. Stand on a hillside above Bodie in the late afternoon. The sun is dropping toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the town. The buildings look small from up here, fragile, impermanent. Beyond them, the sagebrush plateau stretches toward distant peaks. The sky is immense. The wind blows constant, as it always has, as it always will. What is Bodie, really? What does it mean? It's a reminder, perhaps, of the temporary nature of all human endeavors. Even a town of 10,000 people, even streets full of noise and light and activity, even lives fully lived, all of it can fade and be forgotten. The gold that drew people here is gone. The people who came for it are gone. Even most of the buildings are gone. What remains is a fragment, a trace, a whisper of something that was once real. But maybe that's not quite right. Because Bodie isn't forgotten, not completely. It's preserved, visited, photographed, studied. People come here specifically to see this emptiness, to walk these silent streets, to peer through these dusty windows. They come to remember, or to imagine, or simply to witness what time does to the places we build and then abandon. There's something honest about Bodie. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is, a town that lived and died according to the rhythms of geology and economics and human ambition. It rose when there was gold. It fell when the gold ran out. That's not a tragedy. It's just what happened. And what remains has a strange beauty. These weathered buildings under this vast sky. These empty rooms still holding the shapes of lives once lived. These streets where children once played and miners once walked and merchants once called out their wares. The silence here isn't empty. It's full. Full of absence, full of memory, full of the accumulated weight of all those vanished days and forgotten names. As the sun drops lower, the shadows lengthen. The town takes on a golden cast, the weathered wood glowing briefly in the last light. Then the sun drops below the mountains, and the light fades quickly. The temperature drops. The stars begin to emerge in a sky so dark and clear you can see the Milky Way as a river of light overhead. In the morning, Bodie will still be here. The wind will still be blowing through empty windows. The buildings will stand for another day, another year, another decade. And slowly, patiently, inevitably, they will continue their journey back to the earth. This is Bodie. A town left to the wind. A place caught between memory and forgetting. A quiet story, written in weathered wood and empty rooms and the endless sky. And in that quiet, if you listen closely, you might hear something. Not voices, not footsteps, not the ghosts people imagine haunt such places. But something more subtle. The echo of lives once lived. The memory of a moment when this empty place was full. The simple, profound fact that people were here, and then they weren't, and what they left behind still stands, still speaks, still matters. The wind blows. The dust settles. The horizon holds. And Bodie remains. Forgotten by some, remembered by others, slowly fading into the landscape from which it came, patient and quiet and dignified in its decay. This is what becomes of boomtowns. This is what happens when the reason for a place's existence disappears. This is the hushed horizon of a town that was, for a brief moment in time, alive.